Next on Done on a Weekend Projects, we're taking on the #1 threat to the yard of your dreams, weeds. Hey everyone, it's Doug Scott with Redeem Your Ground, and once again I've joined up with our friends at Exmark to do another Done on a Weekend Projects video. If you're a homeowner who takes pride in your lawn, you know how big a headache weeds are. Thankfully, we have the right guy for the job. Exmark ambassador, expert in all things weed control, owner of Alabama Lawn Pros, and all-around great guy, Jason Creel. Jason, thanks so much for being here, buddy.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Doug. Looking forward to it.
All right, Jason, let's start with the basics. What is it that homeowners need to know about weed control?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about weed control, and I want to say that there is more than one right way. But when we talk about doing things the right way, we want to talk about using the right product, we want to talk about using it at the right time, and then we want to talk about putting it out in the right amount.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what is it that a homeowner needs to do to determine what's right in their yard?
Well, half the battle for weed control is identifying the weeds correctly, and we're going to identify them today in 3 different categories. Grassy weeds like crabgrass and goosegrass may look like regular turf grass, but they're not nearly as uniform as the turf grasses we use in the lawn, and so we'd characterize those as weeds. Broadleaf weeds like dandelions and clover, they stand out with their wide leaves, bright flowers, and seed heads. The 3rd category is sedges, like nutsedge, which again looks like a grass, but instead have a solid triangular stem without nodes. The saying goes, sedges have edges with that triangular stem.
All right, so now we know how to identify weeds. Let's cut to the burning question in everybody's mind, and that's how do we kill these weeds or at least prevent them from coming back?
I know that's what everybody wants to talk about, is how do we spray the weeds and kill the weeds? But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about the life cycle of the weeds.
So you're basically telling me I can't just spray and be done?
I'm beginning to be concerned that you may not have listened to anything I've said so far. Unfortunately, I can't fully endorse your spraying and praying strategy. It's not quite that simple. There's some weeds like spurge, they're annual weeds, meaning they sprout, grow, and die in one season. And then there's perennial weeds like oxalis, also known as yellow wood sorrel or nutsedge, and they come back year after year from that same root clump. And then there's warm season and cool season weeds. Warm season weeds germinate in the spring and die out in the fall, and cool season weeds typically are going to germinate in the fall, mature the fall and spring, and then die out as the weather gets hot in the summer.
So these unique life cycles and the seasonal varieties are really the reason why weed control is basically a year-round battle, right?
You're absolutely right, but thankfully it's not as difficult as it might sound. For most lawns, a pre-emergent herbicide application in the spring or late winter, and then again in the fall, is the first line of defense. It's about having that right product at the right time, and that depends on where you live. A classic example would be crabgrass, which typically germinates when soil temperatures reach 55 degrees. So your pre-emergent application needs to go down and be watered in before the soil reaches that temperature. Timing also shifts every year, so watching the weather may be even more important than watching the calendar. If it's still 95 degrees and dry in September, you may need to wait until the soil temperatures cool down a little before that application. Applying it too early or too late can reduce the effectiveness of the application.
All right, so if your weeds have already sprouted, what's the best course of action?
Well, thankfully, that's where the post-emergent herbicides are going to come in, but like we talked about earlier, you want to make sure that you're applying those correctly. For the best results, you want to apply your post-emergents when the weeds are present. But make sure when you're doing this, you're always wearing your PPE and following the label. Different products have different restrictions, so it's best to understand those things before you start spraying.
So when it comes to determining the right herbicide, is there one that takes care of them all?
Well, unfortunately, there's not one singular product, but there is some hope for people that are trying to control weeds in their lawns. One of the things the professionals do is they'll mix multiple products together. So a lot of times when you spray a pre-emergent, you might mix the post-emergent with it. So if the pre-emergent doesn't get it, maybe the post-emergent will get it, or maybe you're late on the pre-emergent, but the post-emergent could knock it out. There's also some combination products out there that can control several types of weeds that might control broadleaf weeds, sedges, and even grassy weeds all in the same product. The negative side is there is some resistance issues, so we want to rotate our products to help have future success in our weed control.
So herbicides aside, does mowing play a role in weed control? Or I guess put another way, before someone jumps on their Exmark, what do they need to know?
I think mowing definitely plays a big part in weed control and just the overall turf health. Lawns cut weekly tend to have fewer weeds than those that are cut every other week. And if you let your grass grow too tall and cut a chunk off to save time, you risk stressing and weakening your yard. The rule of thumb is typically not to mow off more than a third of the blade of grass. And healthy lawns fight weeds more easily, so sharp blades and varied mowing patterns are essential.
So just like weed control, it sounds like you have to stay on top of mowing to win the battle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, even with a good weed control plans, weeds are very persistent. They'll try to find their way into our lawn. So that's why it's important for us to stick with a schedule. Spot treat weeds as they appear and keep your soil healthy, because strong, thick turf is the best natural defense against weeds.
So it sounds like the best weed control boils down to three things: identification, application, and consistency.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with those. If a homeowner will follow those three things, I think they'll be well on their way to a weed-free lawn.
All right, Jason, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate all your time and expertise today.
No problem, happy to help.
Well, we hope this video has helped you get a better understanding of how to get ahead of the spread and prevent weeds from taking over your yard. For more in-depth information on weed identification and prevention, please do yourself a favor and get on over to Jason's YouTube channel, Lawn Care Life. I think you'll be glad you did. And the link to that channel is in the description below. For more Done in a Weekend projects videos, please check out exmark.com/backyard. You'll find everything you need to know to live your best backyard life there. Thanks for watching. Take care.